So tonight we're talking about enhancing habitat without breaking the bank using live stakes for low-cost plants. This is part of the program that we have that is funded through Eco Action Canada. And we're talking to hopefully farmers and various other landowners about different ways to enhance and manage their properties to improve water quality in our local streams. This is based on a project that we did 2 years ago for the Nooksack and the Little Campbell watersheds. And we wanted to bring this to the rest of Langley because it's needed in the rest of Langley. We have water quality issues all over Langley, and we wanted to be able to talk to people throughout Langley instead of just those two watersheds that were impacting Foundry Bay out in the ocean. So we weren't impacting the streams that flowed north of the Fraser River. We want to be able to do that now. So without further ado, I'm Lisa. I work for LEPS, Langley Environmental Partner Society, and we hope you enjoy this. There we go. We did make sure that the presentation worked first. Here we go. So through the presentation today, I'll be talking about why we want to plant, what native plants are, some planting considerations for when deciding on to enhance a site. And then I would like to quickly go through some of the different types of plants you can use as live stakes, some of the identifying features for the winter to be able to go out there and find these things if you wish to do some work this year, or if you want to move on to that, maybe doing more research and then getting going next fall. Live stake planting isn't something for the summertime. It does require quite a bit of water. So why do we want to plant? This is not usually a big question, but sometimes people do prefer being able to see a creek. They want to be able to have a park-like setting because this is kind of the colonial ideal of a park with a creek running through along mowed grass. But planting along a stream bank is really important. Our biggest concern, of course, is the salmon. We want to keep that water nice and cold for our salmon. If it gets too hot, they do end up starting to die. Plus, they have no place to hide from all of their predators. Our local salmon feed tons of wildlife, and they do need to be able to hide. For the farming perspective, it does help with erosion control, and it improves soil structure. It helps improve infiltration of water, while an atmospheric river won't be taken care of just because you plant some trees. It does help with some of the smaller rains to ensure that there's greater infiltration even before the water gets to the creeks. And the biggest thing, though, is biodiversity. We're being faced with, a climate crisis and a lot of other problems, and making sure we have high biological diversity in our along our creeks, along any important sensitive habitat is really important. So our native plants, they are fantastic because, of course, they're the plants that have sort of evolved in these areas. They can deal with stressors that are generally brought to our local environment because this is where they've been for a long time, dealing with hot summers and flash floods and these wild. Yes, we're getting them a lot more. What is the word that I'm getting for? I'm looking for. While they're becoming a lot more normal, these plants did, of course, evolve when we did have floods in the past. So hopefully we can bring back more native wildlife or more wild plants to these areas, and then those native plants also help then support all of our native wildlife that should be here. When we are deciding on an enhancement site, there's a few things that we want to keep in mind. Sometimes we want to think about the long con. We want to try and figure out what's going to be here a lot longer than we are. Succession is how a plant community slowly moves into a different plant community. succession can be halted by invasive species. So we want to try and make sure that we're helping what usually happens. Ideally, we would plant an area with alders, because alders would have been the first kind of weedy tree that would come in. They would be like a native invasive, some people have said, and the alders should come in and start fixing the soil and bringing leaves down and making more soil and getting nitrogen fixed and making it great for other plants to then start moving into a site. So just starting that succession with an enhancement site, knowing that your work today could lead to something even more beautiful, perhaps another 40, 50 years, 100 years down the road. So we want to think long term. Sometimes when we're planting just a small tree right now, we might not be thinking about how much impact that could have in the future, but it could have a ton of impact, and something to definitely think about when we're just looking at shoving sticks in the ground. So when you choose your plants, though, you want to know how much sun there's going to be, how much moisture will be there. Big thing is maintenance. Will you need to take care of invasive plants that could take over an area before the plants become established? Will you need to water? Any of that kind of stuff. And when choosing the right species, there's so many resources online. You don't need me to get into those. And any nursery owners, they're fabulous. All of the people that work at the local nurseries, they know their stuff, and they can definitely tell you just the right plant for an area. Other things to consider are things that you might want to help out or bring to your property. Just for me, I love pollinators, butterflies and bees. So I just wanted to quickly highlight some of the plants that butterflies and bees really like. I love bats. So some of the species that bats really love, both for roosting and I call it forage. So the moths and the beetles and stuff that the bats like to eat, this is the type of food that those moths and beetles like to eat. So forage. Other wildlife can also definitely be enhanced through some easy to find plants, but a variety is definitely the spice of life. It comes in handy to have a large variety of plants in an area to be able to bring in a large variety of wildlife. You may have noticed that some of these were asterisks. So the asterisks on those previous slides are ones that you can actually grow as live stakes, or also called whips. So these things are essentially just a branch that you've shoved in the ground, and because it has special cells in its bark, those branches will start growing roots where they're underground and begin to feed that stick, and it will slowly turn into a plant for you. These are mostly shrubs, but I do have one tree for you if you want to plant some trees. But it's just incredible that you could go around your own property or a friend's property, chop branches off of these specific plants, shove them in the ground. You've got free trees just with your labor to get them. So they do a variable success rate. I looked at a couple different websites to try and figure out which are some of the better ones for you and some of the success rates. Really, if a type of live stake doesn't have a high success rate, just plant more. Then you should end up with as many of the plants as you want to in the end. Willows being the most successful, and they're great because they grow fairly tall, fairly quickly in order to shade streams and wetlands. Snowberries, also fabulous, but don't usually grow quite as tall. So they're listed below the willows. But oso berries down there at the end, some studies say they're not very good. Some studies say they're kind of good. So they're down at the bottom. Oso berry are also referred to as Indian plum in the past. These guys are the first things to flower, those adorable white flowers in the springtime. We're just going to go through most of these except for the oso berry. I didn't add them because aren't that great. So when we're going to collect our stakes, collect them on your own property, your friend's property, a property where you have permission to get them. Please don't go into our local parks and start chopping down trees to make stakes. There is a 5% rule that we try to follow where you only take 5% of the plant. There are some plants, though, like if you do have one on your property that you would like to do this with, it's called coppicing, where you would actually take every single branch off of the willow, like something that's well established, and then it'll grow all sorts of new branches and over the next year, and then you can come in again and coppice it again and take every single one off. It does require special cutting to make sure that you're making good, clean cuts that the plant can easily grow over, and so the wounds aren't exposed for long, so diseases don't get in. But it is an option as well. We want to try and take stakes from multiple plants if we can, because if you only take if you take 100 whips, let's say, you probably won't, but if you take 100 whips off of the same plant, then you only have that one kind of plant's genetic diversity. Maybe if something comes along and eats that plant, or a disease that impacts just that plant, well, all 100 of the new plants that you've put in will probably be impacted as well. But you might have another, maybe willow, same species, but maybe 10 feet over on your property that might just have something that won't be impacted by that disease or that bug. So you want to try to pull some off of different plants so that it's not just one type of plant. And if you don't have a place to get stakes, there are a couple businesses around Langley in the Lower Mainland that do cut whips, and these things are fairly cheap. The ones we get are about $1.50 for a meter long or 36-inch whips, so they're still a lot cheaper than buying potted material. Whoops, wrong way. Just quickly, for those that want a little botany review, just because I'm going to be mentioning alternate and opposite leaves to try and identify some of these plants. Alternate is when your leaves come off, they alternate, they come off the left side of the stem, they come off the right side of the stem, they come off the left side of the stem. Whereas opposite, the leaves come off the left and right at the same point. So the leaves are on the opposite side of the stem. Just quickly, if you want to know that. So some of the fabulous things that you can make stakes out of are native willows. We have a variety. There's probably about 4 different native willows that you can get around here. Some of them have pussy willows, some of them don't. Some of them have like beautiful rich brown bark through the winter time, which is stunning, and some have like a beautiful bright yellow bark in the winter time. These are great. There are some non-native willows around. It's a European golden willow, so if it's really, really yellow, it's probably the European willow. Try to avoid those. The leaves on a willow are alternate, so on the left side, then on the right side, then on the left side, and the right side, and they're quite scrubby, and they can get quite dense as they grow. We have common snowberry, like one of the other ones that are very successful. These guys are more of a fine growth pattern. They don't get really big, though I have seen these over 7 feet tall. They have very fine branches. Their leaves are opposite, and if you're looking for them in the wintertime, the easiest way to identify them are the berries, white, like the snow, so snowberry. Black cottonwood, these grow very quickly and very tall. So a black cottonwood is, if you don't know, these are a really big tree. So if you're looking for trees, fantastic. There are a lot of people, though, that like to avoid cottonwood because they don't have a very long life. They live about 60 years. They grow very fast and very tall, and then they come crashing down very quickly without any warning. So a lot of people like to avoid them. But if you're planting something that's off in a field, and like I said, it takes about 60 years before that tree will come crashing down on something, and some of us will be long gone by then. But cottonwood are really important for our bald eagles. They're a fabulous nesting tree for our bald eagles. And when they do start to die, a lot of them don't fall down. They just lose maybe the top of them. And they're wonderful trees, when they do start to die and rot, for cavity nesters. Woodpeckers love them. Owls love them. Any of the secondary cavity dwellers love them. So they are great. I definitely encourage people to try out cottonwood if they want to. But yeah, it is a tree. So you'll have a very big tree very quickly. Then our red osier dogwood are stunning. These have beautiful clusters of white flowers in the springtime. They get white berries in sort of the summertime, though the birds love them, so you don't usually get to see them for very long. And in the wintertime, these are the ones that have beautiful red bark. They're just stunning. I've taken a photo here, though, of a red osier dogwood, and in the upper right corner is actually our local big leaf maple or broadleaf maple. Just wanted to show that both of these plants are both opposite with their leaves, so the leaves come off at the same point. But the red osier dogwood has what we call naked buds, so it doesn't have that little hard cap over top of the new leaves for the new year. This red osier dogwood, that little bit there that just starts to unfurl and open up, and that will be a new leaf. But the big leaf maple, when they're young, they can have the reddish color. So definitely look for those naked buds, as we call them, so that you can tell the difference between those two different plants. Black twinberry, this is a great one for our hummingbirds and bumblebees, and they are opposite in their leaves, and you'll find that the twigs are all four-sided. It feels like they're kind of like little diamonds if you break one or something like that. So they're pretty easy to identify. Pacific ninebark is fabulous. White umbels of flowers you'll find in the summertime or springtime. And the seeds aren't all that interesting, but in the wintertime, the bark can be pretty cool. It's this lovely peeling bark. There's 9 layers of bark on these when they're older. They're pretty easy to identify just because of all the peeling bark at the base of them. They'll grow into pretty dense shrubs. They can be quite tall, but really stunning when they get older. Salmonberry, you'll probably notice kind of similar to the ninebark with the kind of peely kind of bark. But these guys you'll find I don't know if you can see my arrow, but little tiny prickles along the stems near the bottom of the salmon berries. These guys can be jerks when you're pulling blackberries, invasive blackberries in an area, because for some reason while a blackberry might not get through your leather glove, these guys sometimes do. So if you do use salmon berries, leather gloves, because they can hurt. But gorgeous pink flowers in the springtime. Hummingbirds love them, and so do our bees. And then I love the berries. Salmon berries are edible, the orange ones or a dark red, and they're absolutely delicious. Red elderberry is fabulous. It's opposite as well. It has bumps all over its stems. This one though doesn't get really dense. So if you're wanting to have a more open area with more view of a stream or more view to another side of a field or something, the red elderberry will offer that. So quite an open growth pattern. They have the white umbel flowers as well, but you cannot eat these. Don't chew on the stems. They have cyanide. Who knew? Roses aren't totally successful, but it's so worth it. They're beautiful. You get the pink flowers in the springtime and the lovely rose hips throughout the winter. And there's a couple different kinds of native roses, and this one here would be the Nootka rose. And then the bald hip rose is named because the hips, so these red berries are the hips, the rose hips. The bald hip rose doesn't have the sepals that you can see on these Nootka rose hips. They don't have those at all. So bald hip, they also have bigger prickles. So roses have really big prickles, or thorns, if you want to call them thorns. They can hurt a lot, and they're absolutely solid. So please, if you want to do roses as live whips or live steaks, my apologies, require leather gloves. Absolutely. And I don't recommend kids to use these ones. So the idea is for you to be able to identify plants after all that. That was probably a little fast. So to get help in identifying some of these, like if you are interested to head out and go find some whips on a friend's property to try out some live staking somewhere, I highly recommend iNaturalist. This is a free app. You can use it on your smartphone or on a desktop computer. It's simply it requires a username and a password to be able to make an account, but you can upload a photo into this app and it actually identify the plants using just that photo. The few photos that I've put into this presentation that were mine, I ran them through iNaturalist earlier today, and just those sticks were able, iNaturalist was able to identify all of them correctly. That's exciting. They're lovely. It's a great resource, whether you're trying to identify plants in the wintertime, plants in the summertime, or birds, anything. It's incredible. Moss, it's lovely. So I highly recommend that one. Alrighty. So now you've gone out, you've cut some sticks. Now what you do with it? When you're cutting the sticks, it's best to get like first or second year wood is the idea. The young wood just has more energy so that it can grow. Stakes don't have to be long. While we tend to plant really long ones, it's mostly because people are concerned about invasive plants, and we just plant our stakes and walk away from them. But stakes can be from 0.5 meter to 1 meter long. The key, though, is just making sure that you're getting that 1/3 or to half of that stick in the ground, so that it has lots of space to be able to form roots to be able to then feed the stick above. You want about 2 buds below the ground and 2 buds above the ground, so that those buds can work to become roots. And then of course you'll have some buds ready to become leaves to be able to feed those roots early in the spring. You want to work with dormant plants. The one photo that I showed you earlier of the red elderberry, this photo was taken 2 days ago. And as you can see, it's already getting its leaves. So this plant is no longer dormant. This red elderberry would not be good to use for a live steak, but just because we've had such a warm winter, it's ready to go. But if some of them will still work, but definitely the plants that are still dormant right now would be much more successful than that elderberry that has leaves. If you do feel that maybe it's a little too late to get going on a project, you can put live stakes into pots. You have some pots with some beautiful soil or compost. You can toss some stakes into those pots and have them close to your home where you can actually water them, provide them with shade or whatever through the summertime, and then you'll have free potted plants to plant next fall. So that's kind of fun. I love experimenting with that, and you can take them out and see if they're growing roots. Kind of fun. Whip plantings might require watering for about 2 years, depending. Some of the summers that we've had recently, I would definitely recommend watering if it's a site that you can get to. But it's of course always best to plant these whips into moist areas anyway, so they're hopefully getting watered naturally. So after you've planted your beautiful whips, it will soon be spring and you'll start seeing all those little buds on things. And hopefully we've maybe inspired you to get out to grab some whips and give this experiment a bit of a try. Beyond whips, though, there are other things that you can do to enhance an area. Ephemeral or vernal ponds, digging one of these if you happen to have a friend with an excavator or you just have a big shovel. These are great. This would be a wetland that would dry up in the summertime, so it stays wet long enough to be able to support life like various frogs and that, but they would dry up in the summer so that you don't end up supporting creatures like bullfrogs who require water year round. Any work you do with water Make sure it's not connected to potential salmon habitat, because of course then you've created salmon habitat on your property. A lot of people don't want to do that, so making sure that any wetlands you create aren't connected to a creek, very smart. As well, since it would be great if these wetlands dry up, we don't want any fish to get stuck in them. So if the fish is in the wetland and staying nice and wet and it's happy in there, but then the water just starts going down and down and down and down, that fish could get trapped and not get out of the wetland on time and end up dying. So we try to keep any wetlands that are created disconnected from salmon habitat. We encourage exclusion fencing to enhance an area. Just keeping livestock out of an area allows that area to bounce back. The soil can then relax. The plants will no longer be eaten, so they can start growing, and you don't even need to plant anything, and stuff will come back. Kind of if you build a fence, they will come. And creating wildlife corridors so that areas can stay connected, and adding woody debris. If a tree falls down on your property, and instead of bucking it up and sending it off with firewood, keep it intact if you can and toss it into a riparian area. They're great for diversifying an area, so it's not just soil and then plants. We do suggest, though, avoiding cottonwood, because it does take a lot of effort to be able to get large woody debris out into a field or out to a wetland or a creek side, and a cottonwood is going to rot in about 2 years. And that amount of effort is just, it's that amount of effort. We want something that's actually going to last for a while. We don't want your work to go in vain. But anyway, that's it for me. Are there any questions?